U.S. Chapter 8, Section 4, Roosevelt Square Deal. What did Roosevelt think government should do for citizens? So here's a cartoon of Teddy Roosevelt and the muckraker and raking up this muck and trying to clean everything up and get things the way that they want or he wants it to be. So by the end of the chapter, what are TR's ideas on the role of government? Analyze how Roosevelt changed the government's role in the economy, explain the impact of Roosevelt's actions on natural resources, and then compare Taft with Roosevelt, especially on policies. So when we look at Roosevelt, he's born a sickly individual suffering from asthma. He really transforms himself into someone who is physically fit and mentally strong. And he's considered to be the first modern president because he is going to use the office to shape public opinion. And his way of being president is going to impact how Americans think a president should be. And that's why he's considered to be the first modern president. He is going to push through a whole series of progressive reforms because he's able to use his personality. And more importantly, after a whole host of presidents who didn't really use or exert or demonstrate presidential power, he's going to expand the powers of the presidency in ways that are probably beyond what most people would have expected. When we look at his rise to presidency, he's born into an extremely wealthy family. His family probably has pretty high hopes for him, and he does something that typically wealthy individuals would not do. He pursues life in politics. He wants to make a difference. He wants to make changes. So he's working his way up through the state legislature, and he experiences a tragedy where he loses his wife and his mother in a matter of a few weeks. He's disillusioned. He's upset. And so he decides to heck with everything. He moves out west and becomes a cattle rancher, and he's wiped out in those winters that we talked about earlier. When the Spanish-American War begins, he wants to be a part of what he thinks is going to be kind of a fun, exciting experience, and he goes on to become a Spanish-American War hero, in large part just because of the way that the press follows him and his flamboyance and all those types of things. He gets picked to be vice president, and most people are hoping that by him becoming vice president, he'll kind of disappear. However, once McKinley is assassinated, he becomes president. And again, using this bully pulpit, using his speeches to help shape the idea that Americans have of what should happen. But he describes the role of the American government as playing cards. He says that the job of the American government is to make sure that every single person, well, not every single person, but that the deck is not stacked in the favor of the wealthy and the powerful. So the government needs to make sure that there is no crookedness in the deal, that they are overseeing and making sure that everyone has equal opportunity to get good cards. And once you have your hand of cards, how you play it is up to you. It should be based on talent and ability, not based on trusts and monopolies being able to stack the deck. So when we look at him as a trust buster and a regulator, he is the first person to really side with workers. And he is going to work with the coal company, but they flat out refuse to come to the table and to agree with what Teddy Roosevelt thinks is reasonable expectations. So he tells the coal companies this, says, listen, if you don't like what I suggest, then we're going to come in, we're going to take the coal companies over because we have to have coal to heat in the wintertime, and we will run this with government employees. And the coal company gives in, and workers get better benefits. They get a 9-hour workday. And so this is the first time we really see American government stepping in and doing something in the side of workers, not just the businesses. Railroads are the same thing. He doesn't think railroads should get special treatment, and so he is going to encourage laws that set and limit shipping rates so that railroads can't run over everyone. He is the first person, or president, I guess, to use the Sherman Antitrust Act to go after trusts and monopolies. The thing to keep in mind with Teddy Roosevelt, though, is he does believe that monopolies and trusts are kind of part of the modern economy. The job of the government is to differentiate between good trusts and bad trusts. Good trusts are the ones that are going to make sure that the economy is stable. Bad trusts are going to use their positions of power to use and abuse maybe workers. The other thing with The other thing with Teddy Roosevelt is because of the jungle, he is inspired to get involved in making sure that meat isn't bad and spoiled and rotten, like they said in the book. And he's also going to push for the Pure Food and Drug Act, where people can't make these wild claims that these medicines are going to cure you, and really it's sugar water. So you have to start labeling things and telling people what's in your stuff. When we look at the environment, the real question is, do we conserve or preserve? So preserve would be keeping it in a pristine state. What he is going to do is go along with Gifford Pinchot and say, no, what we need to do is we need to conserve these resources that we can use them. So like, for example, with forests, we want these forests to mature so that way we have lumber to be able to build homes out of. But the American government is the ones that need to protect it. When we look at changes in water policy, the National Reclamation Act, he is going to begin building these water reservoirs out west so that you can use them for irrigation purposes. The real problem is a lot of times those water rights were owned by Hispanic Americans, and the American government is going to go in and really take those lands. And then once Hispanic Americans lose their right to the water, it really limits their ability to continue to own kind of the land that they were able to hold on to. When we look at Roosevelt and Taft, these are just two very different people. Their personalities are very different from each other. Their attitudes on trust are very different from each other. Taft believes that trusts are illegal, and so he's going to prosecute them because the law says that they're not really right. When we look at the thing that's really going to split these two apart is this Bollinger-Pinchot affair. So again, Pinchot was Roosevelt's appointee. He does not like that Bollinger is selling American resources to companies, in particular a coal mine in Alaska. He believes that the U.S. government should hold on to those things and use them for the good of the American country, whereas Bollinger has a slightly different attitude. Pinchot gets a hold of Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt cuts his tour in Europe short, comes back home, and begins to campaign against Taft, and that's going to set up this 1912 election. In that 1912 election, Teddy Roosevelt is going to promote what he calls new nationalism, and there's a speech in the book on it. And again, he's really saying that the government has to make sure that special interests don't have all the advantages. And when he doesn't get the nomination for the Republican Party, he begins the Progressive Party, also known as the Bull Moose Party, and that in part is because someone tried to assassinate him during one of his speeches, and he got shot, and during the speech he said, "I've just been shot, but it takes more than one bullet to bring down a bull moose," and he continues to give a 2-hour speech after that point, and that's where the Bull Moose Party got its nickname. The real impact of this is that the vote of the Republicans are going to be split between Taft and Roosevelt, who was a Republican, and that division in the party is going to lead to Wilson becoming elected president. And that's what you kind of see in these results. When you look at the popular vote, you can see that the Progressive and the Republicans split those, and if they had been together and been combined, they would have been able to win the popular vote, and then Wilson would not have become president.